kind of moving things along now. We, of course, have the latest edition of our conversations with Tracey Brame of Cooley Law School. This time we're talking a little bit about a serious topic regarding ICE investigations and those shootings over in Minneapolis. So without further ado, here's that conversation with Tracey Brame now. Tracey, it is so good to have you back on the program today. Thank you so much for stopping by for another really important conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
Definitely. And, of course, we've started doing this monthly segment right now with you to kind of get a better understanding of some of the top headlines across the country, really, and getting the legal perspective and the lawyer's perspective from a lot of these things, and just kind of helping explain the situations, the headlines a little bit further, and also taking in a lot of questions that we've heard from people and from our viewers already. And that is kind of what we wanted to start doing with this episode as well, and continuing these conversations, is the one regarding those ICE shootings in Minneapolis. There have been a lot of conversations, and right now there are hearings right now in Washington regarding those shootings as well, and the potential future for Homeland Security and these ICE agents across the country, and Border Patrol agents as well. Let's start broadly, Tracey, if you don't mind, when we start this conversation. There seems to still be a lot of discussion and also a lot of confusion from people regarding what ICE agents are and are not allowed to do. We heard from officials within the Trump administration. We even heard from the president saying that they have absolute immunity while on the job. If you wouldn't mind just kind of clearing up some of those confusions that I know a lot of people might be facing right now about what ICE agents are and are not allowed to do while they're in their line of work.
Absolutely. And I understand that there is a lot of confusion, and the way things are playing out across the country, there's no wonder that people are confused. But put relatively simply, ICE has the authority to stop, arrest, and detain people who are in the country illegally, right? That's basically their mandate, right? Is to try to address illegal immigration here in the country. And, when, where, and how they do that has been the subject of much discussion and controversy in recent months. And you referenced, for example, the administration declaring that officers have absolute immunity to carry out their mission in whatever way they see fit. And that is not true from a legal standpoint, certainly. There are no law enforcement officials, state or federal, that have absolute immunity. I will say that it is particularly difficult, though, right, to sue or bring charges against federal officials. And that's kind of one of the dynamics in this whole thing. So while they don't have absolute immunity, they are sometimes seem to act as though they do with impunity, right? It is hard to hold them accountable. So again, their mandate is to address illegal immigration by stopping, detaining, arresting people here who are here illegally, but they have to do so within the confines of the law and certainly within the confines of the Constitution. And what we're seeing play out across the country is the different ways, the different dynamics that are playing out depending on the state's relationship with the federal government or the state's relationship with this particular agency.
And we've also heard a lot, following those shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy in Minneapolis, that the FBI would be taking control of the investigation into those shootings. And then we've also heard, some complaints from city and state officials in Minneapolis saying that, they would like to be part of it. And, maybe they've been invited in and are working in a cooperative function with the FBI. But will the state and city agencies, will they also potentially get a chance to look at these shootings and come up with their own investigations? Because I know there is a big worry right now from some people in Minneapolis that the FBI couldn't possibly have an unbiased investigation here because it involves federal agents. Will the city and or state officials also potentially get a chance to look at their own investigations into these shootings?
So certainly the city and state officials have every right and authority to look at these scenarios from the perspective of state law, what state laws might have been broken, what they might do about that, what the consequences might be. But you mentioned the word cooperation. And I think that is a key word in this conversation, because part of what's happening is that there are varying levels of cooperation between agencies depending on, right, what state we are, the alignment, right, between a particular state and the federal government. So you might have some states like Florida or West Virginia or Tennessee who readily and eagerly cooperate with ICE's mandate as well as their methods right, for doing what they're doing. But you have other states like Minnesota where they might have a different sense of values with respect to how these things are going down, right? So they might have sanctuary cities, they might have protections in place for immigrants, and that frustrates, right, federal law enforcement. But there's nothing legally that mandates the states cooperate, right, with the federal efforts to root out illegal immigration, right? So they can't stop the feds from trying to do what they have the right to do, but they don't have to help them do that. And that's where this tug of war is really coming in. Like, where's the line between, right, having as a matter of principle, I'm not going to help you carry this out, and I'm going to I'm going to affirmatively impede your ability to do so. So of course, the federal government thinks that, I'll just pick on Minnesota, right, is impeding their lawful right to carry out these operations. Whereas Minnesota, again, depending on the location and even on the agency, there are some state agencies that do cooperate with ICE. But, like Hennepin County might say, we are not going to help you do this, and we're going to put some protections in place for people so that you can't come to churches, to schools, right, to other places, right, where people congregate. And so that cooperation really is at the root of the disagreement. So your specific question about the FBI investigation versus the state investigation, ideally, right, someone died, two people died, and ideally the feds and the state would be cooperating to try to figure out whether the shooting was justified or what happened, or even to agree on a set of facts. And that's been difficult in part because of the political climate that we find ourselves in. And so while, again, the state has every right to investigate, if the FBI is controlling the evidence, controlling the narrative, controlling the investigation, it might make it difficult, right, for the state to also do its own investigation.
Yeah, the political elements to this are playing a really big factor into these investigations. And, that kind of plays into this next question for you, Tracey. One of the big reasons we did want to bring you on here today was because of those congressional hearings that are going on right now in Washington with some of the top brass of the Department of Homeland Security. Let's talk about those hearings just broadly speaking again, Tracey. I mean, what are they really looking to accomplish with these hearings? They brought in, again, some of the top officials with the Department of Homeland Security that are in charge of these ICE agents. What are they hoping to really get answers to?
So again, this issue has become so political, and it started to affect the day-to-day life, like quite literally the day-to-day lives of immigrants as well as U.S. citizens. And so it definitely is in the interest of our politicians in Washington and elsewhere to try to figure out what the scope of ICE's authority is and how to evaluate the methods that they're using. And so the hearings are really about trying at least to provide a neutral atmosphere to, again, try to get to an agreed upon set of facts and to evaluate methods, right? So, why are ICE agents wearing masks, or why are they going into homes without warrants, if that's the case? So really trying to, I think, do a couple of things. Try to cut through the narratives, because both the federal government and the states who take issue with the federal government's actions, right, have their narrative about what's happening, and the hearings are trying to cut through that a little bit, and then maybe come to some sort of agreement, compromise, understanding for how this takes place. The Trump administration has talked about, at least ideally, a situation in which they would turn down the temperature. But of course, they want in return the cooperation from the states that they feel have been impeding. What does that look like, right? What is the line? The Trump administration has sued several localities in Minnesota for impeding the investigation. Residents of Minnesota have sued the federal government, right, for the actions that they're taking in Minnesota. Right. And how can we kind of come to an understanding about what the mission is and should be with respect to ICE's actions, and then how do they and they're at an impasse that they need to really solve in some way if they can. There's funding at issue for the Department of Homeland Security. There's just political ramifications again at the federal and state level, and so I think the hearings, and of course the hearings are always political, and any individual legislator may have their own goal or agenda, but overall, right? It's to kind of shine a light nationally on what's going on and to kind of come to where we think we might be comfortable, right, as a country, with this mission as well as the methods.
And there's obviously a political divide when it comes to situations like this, but it's being felt not just in Washington, but really across the country. I feel like, in particular, following the videos of the Renee Good shooting and the Alex Preddy shooting, depending on who you asked and depending on which videos they saw, they might have a completely differing opinion on what took place or maybe who might be at fault in these situations. From your experience, covering these and following along to situations like this and similar ones, I mean, how much help could an unbiased investigation, if everybody was able to come together and put forth an unbiased investigation, put it together and relay it out to the public and everything? I mean, how much could that really help kind of quell all the divide that we've been seeing regarding everything going on in Minneapolis, everything going on really across the country with Border Patrol?
So ideally, an independent investigation of some sort could go a long way, right? If there was a trusted agency or trusted official who could give their input or add to the conversation. But again, the problem is, and you stated, our political climate is such that we have video from a few different angles, right, of Renee, the incident involving Renee Good as well as Alex Preddy, and still we have major disagreements about who was at fault, right, and what happened. Did the agents use excessive force? Were the people who were killed, did they put themselves in that situation by impeding the agents? Like people have, and unfortunately, how you feel about it depends less on what you see in that video than your political persuasion, right? Like so much of it is based on, you're going to look through the lens of how you feel about ICE or how you feel about the administration. And that's really unfortunate. I think we're really at a crossroads, at least with respect to the states that find themselves in the crosshairs of the administration on this issue, this crossroads of really where are we going to kind of go from here as a matter of policy, right? What does cooperation look like and can we get there? And unfortunately, like I said, we certainly mourn the deaths of the people whose lives were taken, and certainly the two people we mentioned, but they're not the only two people that have been killed. And that has forced, but the one thing that's come out of that is that it's forced the administration, right, to actually at least face the public via the hearings, right, face the public view via the narratives, right, that we see coming across in the media. And you see at least overtures to try to do things differently. So whether they'll be meaningful, right, change or cooperation, whether the agents will change their methods a bit, stop wearing masks, get warrants, adjust their relationship with local citizens, we'll see, right? That it would be wonderful if you could get to agreement about that. But I just hope that we don't talk about this while the temperature is hot, but then once it cools a little bit, you have the status quo, and that's the concern.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, this is still a very fluid situation. The investigations are still ongoing. Those hearings at the time of this recording are still ongoing. I guess my last question for you, Tracey, is there's so much going on right now involving immigration in this country. What are you in particular looking for next? What is sort of the next, shoe to drop that you're going to be paying closer attention to, or that we should be maybe paying closer attention to when it does happen? And, if maybe there's a timeline, do you think that where you think that we might be hearing something, if you could also include that in as well?
So that's really hard to say, right? Like, so part of me, I know the midterms are coming up, right? The midterm elections are coming up, and this is certain to be an issue there. And there's a showdown, right, with respect to funding of DHS around some of the demands from the Democrats. And so part of it will depend on how much leverage the Democrats have to kind of force change in this area. Again, ideally, in the mid-range or long term, for years, this is not while President Trump's tenure has been one of the most sensational with respect to how things are playing out, he's not the only president that's had to deal with differences of opinion around immigration. It's been, an issue that has been a through line through the last few administrations. How do you provide a viable path for people to become citizens while still trying to kind of quell the illegal immigration, so to speak. And that's been an intractable issue for a long time. Will this finally force us to think through that? Right now, immigration has ebbed quite a bit, right? So the administration certainly has accomplished that. So where do we go from here? What do we do? So now, what do we do with the people that are here? And how do we provide a path for citizenship, or right, meaningful rules around deportation? And I am hoping that the protests, the different conversations being held around the country will kind of force those conversations, and we'll come to some kind of meaningful path forward.
We'll be keeping a closer eye on that. And Tracey, I want to thank you so much for stopping by, explaining and quelling a lot of confusion that I know myself and a lot of other people have been facing. So can't thank you enough for that. Again, I want to remind everybody that if you want to check out the latest from Tracey, we've got the first 2 episodes of these special segments right now available to you over on Wood TV Plus and our website, woodtv.com right now. Tracey, again, thank you so much for stopping by today. We always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much again for having me.